What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Checkout. It is the podcast where I bring together groups of people who I would start a company with if I could choose anyone in the world. Not too many of us today, just me and Zoe. Zoe, you feeling good? Just the two of us?
Feeling good.
I think if there's any two Checkout hosts that could just carry an episode all the way through, it's you and I.
You think so?
Well, it might be a real ADHD all over the place type of episode, but yeah, we can talk for an hour for sure.
Oh, for sure.
No problem. This is going to be this the season finale, last episode of the season. It's episode 12, so going to be a little bit of a reflection here, but I think that we're going to break this up in a couple different ways. We're going to talk about first kind of half of the year. We're about halfway through the year in 2025. First half of the year, kind of the state of the union in terms of like business, e-commerce, the internet, just general culture, whatever. We're going to get into some questions that we've gotten in the comments and that maybe even that have gotten via DMs and stuff like that. And then we're going to get into predictions. Sound good?
Sound good. Let's get into it.
Okay, cool. So I'll kick it to you first. What's something that sticks out from this year so far for you? Could be an experience, could be anything.
Yeah, I think that the uncertainty and like scrappiness of teams was really tested this year. I know we're probably like beating a dead horse now with all of the tariff talk and stuff, but it felt very scary and uncertain a lot of the year. And so I think that there's a lot of folks in the industry have gotten more comfortable with doing work that might feel like a wasted of time for like to predict or to try to be prepared for things that might not happen. And then like feeling like, wow, this is crazy. And for the listeners, like obviously if you know what's going on with tariffs, you know what we're talking about. But with all of the tariff changes, I just feel like there was so much testing going on with teams. And it's really relatable for me personally, because a lot of the stuff that we do in like customer experience, if you're proactive about things, you kind of prepare for things that might not happen because you want to be prepared for if something goes wrong. Yeah. And so it felt really like kind of relatable to me in a different aspect. But I just think that that's one of my biggest takeaways was just like seeing that people can be a little bit more scrappy and just comfortable with an uncertainty, which was interesting to see.
I want to tell you some things that we were learning about the Breeze website that was costing us a bunch of money that we actually didn't know until we installed a heat map. On our product page, we have bullet points that looked like buttons. We had elements that looked like buttons that you actually can't click. And we were finding out that we were literally losing money because the navigation was so unclear that to the thousands of dollars because of the amount of traffic we're spending, we weren't able to find success. And so heatmap.com was able to kind of highlight and tell us exactly where these users were clicking. And we made that immediate change. Then we saw on the heat map that like we had product tiles where people were navigating to kind of add to cart or learn more about the products. It's too far down on the page, but majority of the revenue is starting and driven from those specific tiles. And by us just moving those up the page so it's less of a scroll on mobile, we're able to drive almost 2 times the revenue from the same exact amount of traffic. That, again, was only coming from heat map. I think that's super powerful because it's able to track specific dollars per element on your website, and no other thing in the world can do this. Not that I know. And so this is why it's easy enough for me to use or our CRO to use. There's no negotiation. There's no back and forth. It's either making us money or it's losing us money. And it's the reason why I'm super thankful for the heat map team to be a part of this crew. And if you want to try it for 14 days, free of charge, worst case, doesn't work for you. Best case, you make a bunch of money, you save a bunch of money. It's a win all around. Hope you guys try it out.
Yeah, and then when just to kind of summarize, like kind of bring everybody up to speed on this, because I have noticed actually one thing that has come from this show that I did not expect is that I've had a lot of influence, and I think it's maybe because our first couple episodes were a little more focused on like celebrity brands, influencers, things like that. We started to gain that traction. I've had a lot of influencers or content creators, people who are from that space, actually reach out to me and say, hey, I love this podcast. It feels like I'm sitting in a conversation about me, right? Like I'm sitting in the boardrooms or on the marketing teams that are talking about using me and like getting the insights that they're, which I'm like, well, that's not something I intended at all. Which I would probably go on to say, like, you could probably get that from a lot of marketing e-commerce podcasts, but maybe some of those are just too jargony. To bring it back, you're talking about tariffs, and I think a lot of our e-commerce audience is probably going to be up on tariffs and know what's going on there. A lot of the world is up on tariffs. Basically, the TLDR is that brand owners, people who own brands or people who are marketers at brands or people who are internal at brands have been very concerned about a really high tariff, regardless of their stance on, the administration or whatever, have been very concerned about a really high tariff because it could be basically detrimental to the point of like, we wouldn't even have a business if we can't import from China type of thing. So it's been a huge concern. And like you're saying, like seeing people get scrappy and adjust, a lot of people have been putting hiring pauses on things that at a macro level would, maybe people would say aren't good, but putting hiring pauses on, quickly reshoring, stuff like that. Reshoring meaning manufacturing in a different country. One thing that I will say that I'm going to frame a question and then I'm going to kick the question back to you. I noticed that a couple brands that I talk to on a regular basis, there's probably 10 or 15 brands I talk to either every week or every other week, started sort of like making moves to prep for tariffs, I would say back in November, right after the election. And then those moves paid off, right? So they reshored from China to Vietnam way back then. And you could look at that. I could hold that up as a case for like, be prepared, like keep your finger to the wind and try and figure out like which way the wind is blowing and like skate where the puck is headed. But I think that a theme that's come up over and over on this podcast is like, just stay focused on the stuff you can control and do that. Like you don't control what happens with tariff. You don't like to try and like predict what's going to happen in something that you have no control over is sort of a fool's errand. And so you're coming at it from the stance of CX, where you guys are often trying to prepare for potential scenarios that might not even happen. And, Bart and I would say Nate, who's been sort of an honorary honorary co-host of the Checkout, have been very much preachers of like, just kind of like do the thing over and over again and don't really worry too much about anything else. Just do the same thing that works over and over again. Don't try and like, get ahead of changes and stuff like that. It seems like there's an obvious balance, right? Sometimes you should try and get ahead of changes. Sometimes, you're just going to spend a whole bunch of time working on things that don't matter, right? What are your thoughts on this? Like, do you err more on the side of like, be prepared, or do you err more on the side of like, for the most part, you should focus on the things that are high leverage, that are high leverage, and then just adjust if changes happen? What are your thoughts?
I'm a big believer of having precautions for if something has happened once, even if you think it might not happen again, have a precaution or like things in place for a plan that if it does happen. For example, I've seen this happen over and over again with stock and inventory issues where companies just keep pushing, and then they're out of stock and they have a lot of complaints from customers, or they oversold, or they have to cancel orders and refund orders, and people are angry and they're upsetting a lot of people and they lose a lot of revenue. And then one of the more immediate responses to that is like, oh, well, we won't go out of stock again, so that won't happen. So we don't need to like do any precautions for it. But then you see just a couple months later, it happens again.
Right.
And so that's like an example of something that is detrimental to like the revenue and the experience of your customers. And I think anything that's like that, where there is a chance that it can happen. I think that people a lot of times will live like as if everything will go perfectly.
Yeah.
And so I think that and you don't have to like spend a lot of time. A lot of times it's just like recapping what you did to fix that problem and having that like communicated with the team, and then
write it down somewhere.
Write it down and then like talk about what you would have done differently and how you can prevent it in the future. And that in itself doesn't take too much work, but if you do that for every issue that you have like in business, it
Yeah.
might seem like you're taking a lot of time, but it does prevent and like save companies, because I've seen companies do the opposite where they just like don't learn from mistakes and then literally fail.
I do think there's a balance. I think something that you just hit on that I think it kind of triggered this thought of, I think however much time and energy you spend trying to fix. So if something goes wrong, you obviously can't go back in time. And I think that sometimes doing that, like, let's do a postmortem on it, or let's kind of recap this,
Yeah.
or can get real like blamey, or like can go. It's like, okay, at a certain point, we're just talking about what we would do if we could go back in time. We can't though. So like, let's just talk about what's important. So I think that's part of it. But I think part of it too is that it's like, okay, well, the reason that happened, the reason we ran out of stock, you use that example. So let's use that example. The reason we ran out of stock was because of XYZ. And now because of this, that just shouldn't happen again. So if it's like, okay, that's a problem that's happened once, we see it as unlikely to happen again. We should have a contingency plan for if it does, but we should spend as much time creating that contingency plan as we think it is likely to happen again, right? So if we think this is a likely recurring issue, this is sort of like, we should kind of put some effort into like, what do we do, right?
Yeah.
But if we don't think it's a highly likely recurring issue, it should just be like, all right, well, if that, like, I don't know, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever, right? Like maybe it's in a meeting and somebody says, all right, now you say, all right, now take all those notes, put them into like a bullet pointed SOP and save that here. And that'll be our SOP from now on. And that's it. That's the amount of effort, right? So I think it's the amount of time and energy that should be put into solving future problems, or, preparing for future scenarios that may or may not happen, is probably commensurate with how extreme that scenario is and how likely that scenario is to happen.
And also, I think I've learned what actually does happen over and over again from working with so many different brands. And so I think when you're siloed into one brand, or you're a new founder and you haven't had a lot of experience under the hoods of other brands, or maybe haven't talked to other founders, talking to other founders and people who in the space, once you start talking to them, your eyes will be open to like what actually is an issue and what can be solved and what won't happen again. Because a lot of times you'll ask someone like, oh, has this ever happened to you? And you'll be surprised at how many times it's happened to so many others. So I use that as like learning from other people a lot, as like another, just how much time should I spend trying to get to the bottom of this? And then going back to like the tariffs, if you use that example, so many people have spent like hours and hours and hours on like, well, should we move our manufacturer and all of this? And that one's such a tricky one. And I'm sure that there's people now still trying to figure out like, do they long term, now it's not so much of a rush, but like, do they still move forward with those plans? I don't know.
Yeah, I think where it gets interesting is like I said a second ago, like it's about like assessing likelihood, like how big of a deal will it be if this thing happens, and how likely is it to happen? And that's how much energy you should put into it. Going back to the tariff thing, it's really interesting. Now that I'm thinking about those few brands that started their reshoring back in November, and then by the time the tariffs hit, they were reshored, so it didn't affect them very much. Those founders are people that when the election happened, they saw it as a highly likely scenario that their business would be hurt by the election. Right. So they big, whereas like there's a whole other group of founders that maybe just like, were like, well, no, I think this will generally be good for me. You know what I mean?
Or just like, frankly, not paying attention, which is not like to point, like not like a bad thing.
They're just focused on their own, whatever.
Yeah. When you're in your own world and you're like, I don't know, like we'll deal with it when we deal with it. Like there's so much going on. It's hard.
Yeah. My point is that there's some subjectivity there. Like, will, the administration affect your business or not? And if so, how? Well, it depends on what you think. I don't know, but like, it depends on what you think. And people would be asking me and I'd be like, I don't know. Right. Like, this basically comes down to like what you think is going to happen, or what you think about the administration or whatever. And so in this case, you could say that, like, at least for that brief period of time where the tariffs were at 145% in China, it paid off huge for them to like kind of be able to like call it, like to make a good call on the future. And the effort they put into reshoring was worth it. For the most part, I would usually advise people to like not put that much effort into a problem that hasn't happened yet and that they are just like speculating on. But then every now and then they're right, So I think I don't know that I have like a good firm answer on this, because I think at that time at the time November, I would have probably advised people like, you don't know what's going to happen. So I think that like putting a bunch of your time and effort and focus into this instead of things that could be more impactful to the business is probably not a good idea. And then they turned out being right, at least for a short period of time. And then over the long time, maybe they won't be right, because it'll be like, yeah, actually, like it was only a problem for like a month or something like that. Right. So I guess that is, I don't know, like if I have like a good, that is probably being a good founder or a good entrepreneur, is like having that feel for like, how likely is a problem to happen and how big of a deal, or how likely is a scenario to happen and how big of a deal is it if it does, and thus how much should I prepare for it? That's probably like is the process of being a good founder, right?
Yeah, and actually, now thinking back to the timeline, and I briefly talked about this, I don't know, on one episode, but in January was when I was looking to acquire that one brand. And I think I talked about the same scenario where, I can't remember how in depth I got, but one of the reasons why they struggled was, okay, they were a Shark Tank brand and they did really well. Sales spiked up after Shark Tank. But then when COVID came around, their manufacturer in the US was required to only produce essential items. And then, so they were at pause, and it was in the US. And then so they had to find another, so it was at first just pause, but then after they were allowed to do more manufacture, the manufacturer straight up told them, we're just going to continue doing these essentials because like it's bringing us good business, and they just shut them out. And then they went from their US manufacturer to a manufacturer, I believe, in India. And it's so interesting to think about, like, me in January going through that like review process of what happened with their operations, to think that it was like going backwards because of the struggles in the US. And they could not I'm not sure how knowledgeable about the 3PLs or the manufacturers in the US they were, but it seemed like they had such a hard time with finding another US manufacturer. So it's just fascinating to see how everything plays out.
Okay, Bart, one of the big things I'm seeing a lot in Facebook ad accounts these days is a lot of spend on product catalogs. And I'm really, really seeing this a ton in apparel and clothing. I'm curious how much of your budget is going toward catalog?
Yeah, we have really good product photography. So a majority of our spend recently has been going to catalog ads. 40, 50, and sometimes 60% is going into catalog ads, DPAs. And yeah, we're seeing a lot of great results from it.
Yeah, even just going catalogs to cold audiences. One of the issues, though, of course, with catalogs is that you can't stand out creatively. Like you can't, it's just your product photos. So like I think we've solved for that in an interesting way with Dad Gang, with our partner Marpipe. So can you just kind of break down what you're doing with Marpipe to try and get better results out of your catalog ads?
Marpipe was able to come in and kind of mix up our creative a lot. We kind of felt like we were cornered into this. You can only show white background images or whatever's on your Shopify site. And they were able to come in and bust out a bunch of variations of that catalog, adding copy or adding various backgrounds, or even simple things like price. Before that, we were just kind of, held to white background. Here's the hat and here's the copy of the ad. Whereas now that creative can showcase a lot more about the brand to a cold or a remarketing audience.
Yeah, cool. So if you're a Facebook advertiser, marketer, founder, anything like that, you're most likely running product catalog ads in your Facebook ad account already. Check out Marpipe if you want to basically just put those product catalog ads on steroids. Yeah. That's a good one. That's a good learning. Just the general, like, how I think, like, how much do you care about macro environments? How much do you prepare for scenarios that may or may not happen? I don't know that we have like a good framework, other than I think the good founders I see spend the energy and effort and money they put into preparing for scenarios is tied to the likelihood of it happening and how bad it would be, or how extreme, how impactful it will be if it does happen. And then, then there's a lot of luck. The founders that we hold up as really, really good founders probably just get that right a few times, and that,
Yep.
and a big reason why they get it right is no other reason than luck. Cool. One of the learnings or thoughts that I have right now is like, or thoughts from the first like half of the year is just about how saturated people's lives are in general, right? So specifically maybe on the internet, like they're saturated with so many products that can do so many different things, and like 15 like there's very few product categories now that don't have multiple competitors in them, even if they're very niche, obscure product categories. They're saturated by more content creators than ever before. They're saturated by just, more content than ever before, more news than ever before, and more like, I don't know, cultural events happening than ever before. And I think cutting through that is really something I've been thinking about a lot, and like building genuine connections with people. And how do you do that as a brand? You'd be proud of me, I've been dialing up some customers for Royo, right? So I'm the VP of marketing at Royo bread company. And I've been like, just reaching out to some customers being like, hey, you're a loyal customer, could I give you a call? And then I just did 2 of them today. I got, phone calls with some of our most loyal customers today, and just chatted with them. And they were honestly like, one of them was like, well, I don't know. Like, what do you want? Like, what do you want? Why are you calling me? Like, like he was nice and stuff, but he's like, are you just like chat? Like, cause I'd be like, oh yeah, that's interesting. And I bring something up that doesn't seem related to Royo at all. And because it's not, I'm just like chatting with him, getting to know him.
And he's like, what are your intentions?
Like, what do you want me,
like, what do you
talk about? Yeah. What are your motivations?
That's so funny. But did you have any learnings?
Well, yeah, I certainly did. But I think the bigger thought is about, I definitely have had some learnings in chatting with our customers. And I have this general thesis that if you get on the phone with some of your most loyal customers, or just some of your earliest customers, or whatever, people who love the product, if you don't have a product that's, replenishable or whatever, just get on the phone with some customers. Not in a customer service scenario. Because if it's a customer service scenario, they're like already framed in a certain kind of way, right? Like they're already like, well, I'm having this bad experience. But just like chat, just get on the phone to chat with them. I have this theory and thesis that you will find one of 2 things. You'll either find use cases for your product that you did not expect, or you'll find just a vibe, right? And it's like kind of repeated. So here's some examples. So if I were the VP of marketing or founder, whatever, of duct tape, I don't know, right? Like some duct tape brand. If I started getting on the phone with customers, I would talk to all kinds of different people from all kinds of different walks of life. But the main thing would be like, oh, I use duct tape for, and there would be my most common use cases, which I already probably which I already know pretty well, probably. And then there would be some other set of use cases that is surprising to me and maybe more common than I think, right? So it's like, oh, people use it to do this way more than I thought, or some version of this way more than I thought, which is great. It gives you like more ad angles that you can use. It gives you, gets you a little closer to the customers. And this is the thing that, like, back when you worked retail, you could just chat with the customers. You kind of like knew who they were and what they were all about and stuff. And when you sell stuff on the internet, they're just names on a screen, and you kind of forget that they are people but like one of the things, I just had 2 conversations today with people from Royo, and just in those 2, both of them mentioned running marathons. They had both run a couple marathons. One of them then had like taken cycling pretty seriously. And so it's like, they were both like interested in endurance athletics. Not a super common like a relatively common interest. A lot of people have that interest, but it's like, okay, again, then that's the vibe thing. So if you were like, let's say Stanley, right? So use cases, that's the duct tape example, or you'll notice a vibe. And this, I think the best example of this I could come up with is like Stanley. If you were the VP of marketing at like Stanley Tumblers, if you got on the phone with 100 customers, you could probably make a meme that would apply to all 100 of them. You know what I mean? Like there is a vibe about these, mostly girls probably, right? And I think that's the other thing I think that's what it is with Royo is I'm like, oh, there's this like emerging vibe, right? And I think that is, I think if you're selling stuff, trying to sell stuff to anybody and you're not doing that, that's probably, I think you probably should be. But that into the larger question of like, how do you connect with people and cut through all of that noise? You know what I mean? Thoughts on that?
Well, I think another thing that you will learn by talking to more of your customers too is for exactly what you're saying, but then also annoyances that customers have that aren't annoying enough to reach out, but will affect the experience overall. So, for example, when we did it actually, let me use Aaron from Hush Blankets. He is a really big advocate of calling your customers. And I believe I might, you guys will have to like go and look at the real story, but it went something along the lines of it was, they do weighted blankets and in the summertime, their sales dropped because they're big, like heavy blankets and, it's hot. And so he went and he called his customers and he asked them what their feedback was. And there were so many people that said, I wish there was like a cooling weighted blanket because like this, I love my weighted blanket, but it's way too hot and blah, blah, blah. And so for product and development, where it's like, these people aren't going to write in and say, hey, this blanket I bought is too hot, like there's these like hopes and dreams and different things that annoy them about the product or they wish they would have had. And so product and development and product improvement, you find out so many different things that like people aren't going to reach out, take their time to tell you that. But if you probe them, they have all kinds of insights. So
for sure.
Like it's talking to your customer. And like you said, if you're in retail talking to your customers, you'd get the same impact of like, man, I really like this, but I wish you had X, Y, and Z, or I wish it did this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's been leading me to this theme that we've come back to over and over on the podcast. We've hit on this theme with AI ads, and then we've hit on it with talking about influencers and content creators and stuff like this. And I think that the next wave of like really great brands is going to be ones that figure out how to create like genuine connection. What are content creators and like good influencers really good at? They're good at making you just like feel like you're friends with it. Like if you listen to any podcast, you usually either listen because it's informational and you learn from some stuff from it, or you listen because these people are just like your friends, and you just kind of feel it feels like a good hang session, or it's a combination of the two, right? Like it's some combination of the two things, usually. And so people who are really good at that online are just like people who are relatable, personable. They're able to somehow create content that makes you the viewer feel like, oh, they understand me, they get me. And that could be comedy content, they could be parodying. Like some of the posts I identify with most are like parody posts of like business bros. You know what I mean? Like where somebody's like, I wake up at 2 a.m, I get straight into the ice bath, fully submerged for 20 minutes. I don't breathe. Like, like those are the best posts, I think. Cause I'm like, this person's clearly getting these as well. And also thinks they're kind of ridiculous, right? The subtext of that joke is we're getting a little crazy, right? With the morning routines. So like, even if you could make skit content. Like think about any content creator you like. The reason you'd like them, whether they create comedy or serious content or whatever, is because you feel they understand you usually. And I think that the next wave of brands will be the brands that are really good at doing that. And I'm not saying that you can't do that with AI ads, or that you can't like, but I kind of feel that the next wave of brands will be the ones that figure out how to use AI in assisting them in doing things that are very uniquely human. And the way that like I'm trying to do that at Royo is like, like we just hired somebody to do some like man on the street content for us. Will it be super relevant or related to Royo? I don't know. Probably not. How do you like, other than being like, have you tried Royo Bagel? Like, there's just like no way to be on the nose with the brand. Like, but can you be like, tell me food stories from like, from dates or like whatever. I don't know. There's probably some like good lead in questions there that relate to just like food and dating and whatever in general that like everybody relates to. That can tie back into Royo in some way, or maybe can't. Like maybe it doesn't, but it still just comes from us because we're like, yeah, I don't know, like just part of being human. We're trying to be better, right? Yeah. We're also doing some skit content, right? Like comedy skits, right? That are maybe kind of related to food, maybe not. And like podcast type stuff, right? And I think that it's really hard for me to justify like, hey, doing this podcast is going to help the brand, or doing this or that. Like, in that sense, I'm like not over investing in it, because I'm like, it is kind of a moonshot. But I also have this general idea, and I don't know that I'm like communicating this really succinctly, but I have this general idea that if you get good at doing the things that people who, a lot of people like and follow on the internet do, which is just like being relatable and relating, that's like the next wave of good brands. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's the theme is community, because human beings, even the introverts, still want some type of community, which you see in like gaming. Like there's like, even if you say you hate humans, but you still want some type of community. We're just like not made to be alone. And I think that brands, like you're saying, they need to have some type of community. And if there still could be good brands that maybe don't have that like connection or relatability, vulnerability, if they're solving a problem. But as soon as there's another company that's solving a problem and creating community, then that brand is going to be so much more like the fans and the customers become fans, and they feel so loyal, or they have this loyalty, and they have like so much faith in this brand because they understand and they connect. And it's a lot about emotion too. Like, I think that's whenever I see, have you Sarah Levinger? Yeah. Levinger. And a lot of times when she's talking about ads, she's talking about exactly that too, is like, you want to make content that sparks emotion and a sense of community. And I do think that there's been brands who have been, well, we've seen this trend a lot, or in the last couple of years, I would say, but the ones who can't figure out the community part, and that they are focused more on just the money part, and they forget about the customers. Those are the ones that are struggling.
Yeah. And the brands that, again, just forget that they're not just names on a screen, or that really get like, oh, how do we make like tons and tons of AI content or whatever? And it's like, maybe that works, but like, if you're not really getting the why of why it's working or how it's working, that I think you're eventually going to miss on. And again, I'm not poo-pooing on AI content. I think you can use AI to help you. But I'll give an example. Okay, so a lady I talked to today, she spent most of the time talking to me about health and fitness. Why? Because I called her from Royo, and we're just like this, better for you bread and bagel brand, right? And she mostly eats our bread, so we're this better for you bread better for you bread brand.
Wow, that's a good one.
That's a lot. And she's like, yeah, I mean, like I would have just like cut out bread, but you guys, it's so good, right? And like eventually I got to talking to her about like, she's like, oh yeah, I think you like could do really well with moms. Like moms are a lot more conscientious about what they feed their kids these days. They weren't when I was a mom. She's like my parents. Her kids are my age. And she's like, and I'm like, oh, what else? Like if you were, and I just gave her this. I said, hey, so like if I were to open up my Instagram right now, it probably like, and I think I opened it up really quick and I was like, oh, okay, so here's like a stand-up comedy clip. Here's like a clip from a business podcast. Like here's an ad about, AI. Here's some basketball highlights because it's NBA playoffs right now. Here's like, I just kind of told her like, oh yeah, like, this is kind of where the algorithm has me. Right. And like that frame made her be like, it just made her be like, oh yeah, like there's a bunch of other stuff that I'm into besides just like health and fitness and recipes. So she was saying like, yeah, mine would end up being like, she's like, oh, I like stand-up. I like a lot I follow like a lot of stand-up comedians. And like, she even could name some of them. And then she's like, oh, and then there's this girl who I follow that really helps her. Like, oh yeah, she like creates a lot of content like this. And then she was like, oh, and then your guys' content, I get a lot of recipes from it. Right. So we post a lot of recipes for Royo. So it's like, I'm like, yeah, I've been really thinking about like the recipe content's great. Should we just do more of that? Or should we do some content that's more personnel? I'm asking her, right? Should we do some like skits that are, like parody skits of like health influencers or things like that? And she's like, you should definitely, that would be hilarious. Like, that'd be great. Right. Because it's like, I already get that like you're in that world. So you're sort of like poking fun at yourself even a little bit. Right. And she's like it just kind of like people are multifaceted. And she's like, I think if you did that, somebody like me would feel even like more depth of connection with you, even though I already buy from you guys all the time. Right.
Yeah.
Like I would just feel more depth of connection. If I could see the people behind the brand on camera, like doing stuff more often, I think I would feel more connection, and especially if that stuff it's one thing if it's just updates or whatever, if that stuff's also entertaining, like that's great, and so, yeah, I think that there's something there, you know what I mean? Like, can we show the people, the faces behind this brand in a way that's not just boring, like, hi, I'm this person and I work here and let me do an update. That's not bad. I think that's fine, maybe for stories or whatever on Instagram. But can we like show the people behind the brand doing interesting, exciting, funny, entertaining, whatever kind of things? I think that is, and then if you can repurpose that stuff to ads, I think it's even better. So that's my sort of current thesis. Like I did a vlog. I know you're a big vlogger girl.
Love my vlogs.
You're in your vlogger era. I did a vlog the other day, but like, I can't just do a vlog. Like I've watched your vlog, Zoe, and you'll just be like packing and you'll just not say anything for 30 seconds sometimes.
Yeah.
And
like, have some little music on.
You're probably more of a consumer of the vlog format. And that probably is more like what the vlog format is. I can't do that. I'm like, I gotta be talking about something. Like this video's gotta be about something. It can't just be about me.
Well, when I was first vlogging, I realized that I would say, I felt the need to like say what I was doing, but then I wouldn't film what I'm doing. So I'd get to the end of the day and I'm like, oh, so I just have a vlog of just staring at me, like recapping everything that I did, when like the vlog should be like watching what you're doing, or like, I don't know, there's different styles.
Everybody talks about optimizing their ads, but they don't spend enough time talking about optimizing their overall website, which is something that I think more of us need to spend time doing, and more of us need to spend time thinking through. The reason why most people don't do it is because you actually can't track revenue per element on your site. Heatmap.com does that. And that's something exactly why I love them and why we use it, because it's easy enough for me to use and it's easy enough for us to like communicate what exactly the changes are doing for our people. I like heatmap.com because it specifically drives revenue for us per element that we have. And so there's no real back and forth discussion. It's either going to start to work or we're going to get rid of it because it's tied directly to revenue. Google Analytics, which we all terribly hate, only talks about what's happening on the overall website, not the actual elements within the website. At the end of the day, the only valuable data point that we can gather are the ones that drive revenue. And if you aren't able to track that or update that, you're really wasting your time, which is why we use Heatmap, because we're able to track that specific data and know what optimizations we need to do next. Head on over to heatmap.com, give it a 14-day free trial. Worst case, it's not for you. You don't want to use it. Best case, you find a bunch of money and you make a bunch of money.
In all honesty, I don't know that you could even characterize mine as vlogs, but I basically just did this thing where I was driving in my car. I set up the camera and I kind of like went on this kind of 20-minute monologue, I guess you could say, about just a story about me, kind of some backstory about me, about how I'm a former professional athlete and I like am on Ozempic, right? And like like that whole journey and like why I'm like, I don't love that. I don't tell people that, right? Like it's kind of
Yeah.
shameful, right? And you know, it had my personality in it. Like I can't really talk about anything serious for more than 5 minutes without making a joke, probably more than like 1 minute without making a joke. So it had some of that in it, but then I just sent it to our editor, like who edits a lot of our ads. And he pulled some shorts out of there that I'm like, these are good, dude. Like, did I do this? Was this me?
Yeah.
Like, I don't, you know, like these are good. I think these will work really well as ads. They could work well as organic posts. So I think that's the sweet spot that I'm really thinking about lately is like, can you just create content that's good and people want to watch? And then Royo is a part of it. And the brand is just a part of it. It's just a part of your life. It's a part of the content. And so it works, you know, however you want to use it. It works organically. It works as ads. It works however, you know?
Yeah. I've been thinking about this a lot in the influencer space too. I have a fun new gig that I've been working on. I'll tell you about it later. But in the influencer space, I'm looking at a lot of applications for this brand. And I've noticed that the influencers like think that if they just show, or I guess let's call them micro influencers. They think that if they just like have a whole page that's like them talking about the brand, that like that's them showing their love for the brand and they should be a good influencer.
Mhm.
And it's so ironic because maybe that like, that shows how much you love the brand, but brands are actually looking for people who have community outside of just their brand because their brand page is that, right? And so I think I'm doing a whole like influencer success course thingy for specifically like being a good brand partner. And one of the biggest things is like, believe it or not, like stop talking so much about brands, like
Right.
connect with people in other ways and build like true community around like your passions and what you can relate on, and then fit the brands within that. Like
That's the ideal.
yeah,
It
exactly.
doesn't monetize as well early on for them, for the creator, for the influencer, right? But when you're just talking about products from the jump all the time, first of all, you're just not going to get any traction. Nobody's going to follow you. Nobody wants to be sold all the time, right?
Yeah.
The brands are already doing that and they're going to outspend you. And you know, secondly, it's just like over the long run, I think that I don't mind at all. And I also think there's so many different ways to work with a brand. Like, so I have a different podcast than this, a comedy podcast. Called Dark Mode. Zoe's been on it in case anybody wants.
Listen to our episodes. It's so funny.
Yeah, it was the most fun Zoe's ever had on the podcast. She's never done a comedy podcast, to be fair.
I didn't even know that that's what I was walking into, which was comedy in the first place because I just wasn't paying attention. I just knew I had to be there.
It was fun. Yeah, you guys should watch it. Well, maybe I'll link it up in the description of the show notes. Yeah. But I have been, you know, I don't know what got me onto that. I got distracted. Anyway, yeah, I have like this other show that's like a comedy podcast. And like one of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is like, you know, better, you know, if as a comedy podcast, if we could work with who are the brands that we actually use, myself and my co-host, you know, we use Royo, we use like True Classic. We both wear True Classic. We use, I think he uses Hims. You know, I use some other like products, but like there's just like a small handful of brands that we kind of already use and also kind of already fit our vibe. Like True Classic does a lot of funny stuff. Dr. Squatch does a lot of funny stuff. Hims, you know, I don't know if they really do a lot of funny stuff, but they could. They're on a lot of comedy podcasts and stuff like that. And it's like, what if instead of like, we also thought about Dad Gang, but I think Dad Gang's whole thing is that they're like a not funny dad brand. They're like actually a cool dad.
Yeah.
And so like what we've thought about is like, you know, instead of just trying to like sell pay for post or sell spots on the podcast or sell whatever is traditional that is sold for influencers, like what if you sold something in a and I'm going to use the podcast as an example, but I think this works for anybody. I know a lot of influencers or content creators listen to this, whether you're a TikToker or a Instagram person or whatever. What if I sold a package like this for the podcast? What if I said, hey, it's actually, you know, I don't know, XYZ, let's call it, I'm just going to use like easy math numbers. It's $1,000 a month to, you know, it's $5,000 a month total. And as doing that, you know, and it's for 3 months minimum, As part of that, what you get is we are going to obviously feature you on the podcast as we would a normal podcast sponsor. But then we're also going to make you like 10 ads per month, 5 of which will be from the podcast studio, another 3 of which will be like skits that we come up with, and another 2 of which will just be like UGC testimonial style. Right. And so it's like, now we're like also fitting to another category for them, right? Because paid media on Meta ads is probably like a much larger category than their influencer. And it's like, we're feeding that main beast at the outside. And, maybe I can charge $5K a month for that as a content creator. Whereas if I was just selling them a podcast sponsorship, like, that price is pretty, it's like, how many views does it get, and what kind of podcast is it? Maybe that's only $1,200 a month, something like that. So I just think, and then, the reason I mentioned a few brands is because like, yeah, long-term, like how do you do, like you work with just a few brands doing that, you know what I mean? The ones that you actually believe in. I think that's a better way. And I think you can adapt that to a lot of different things.
Yeah, it makes it more complicated because
they don't know how to categorize your expense and all this.
Yeah, and it's like a lot of times in the past, it's just like, oh, trading money for posts, like, and then, but if you can show your value in all of those different ways and like speak to the brand's language, it's so much like more valuable.
For sure. And also, it is hard, right? Like it's hard to actually get a good ROI for a brand on a pay for post. Almost nobody's doing it. Almost no influencers that we go and pay for a post are getting us a good ROI.
I'd like to look at them as pay for posts are a good test to see if someone would be a long-term ambassador.
Yep.
Because you can see if people will actually like click their link and everything. And if no one does, so sometimes you have like the biggest people, you do a paid for post and you get literally nothing.
Right.
And except some eyes, and eyes are good. But if you don't get some clicks on the link and everything, then it's like, okay, that maybe wasn't worth it.
Yeah. And I think, my thought on it is just, it's like really hard to get somebody an ROI on pay for post. But we have an influencer we're working with right now on Royo. Her pay for post didn't really get us like the ROI we wanted, but we still whitelist with her and we still have her create content for us for ads every month that we use for whitelisting. And it's like, and we might do another pay for post. It's like, oh, maybe we even develop a product with her down the line and she has a royalty, you know what I mean? So it's like, kind of trying to like have more touch points with brands that you like more, fewer brands that you like more and actually use that are going to just naturally be a part of your content. If I'm a content creator that does like mom skits or dad skits or family content or whatever, Dad Gang is just such an easy product integration. Just like wear the hat, and that's what you will find about all of the brands that you actually use is that they're just a very easy product integration because you're using them.
Yeah.
I think we've beat this horse.
Yeah.
I think that they get it.
The viewers are like, we get it.
Yeah, we understand. Like, be better, basically. And it all stems from this idea that I have of like, how do you create genuine connection on the internet? And I think it's hard and it's a moving target, but especially for brands, like brands have been able to pay for the deficit that they have in creating genuine connection. Like they're not great at creating genuine connection. So they just pay for the connection, right?
Yeah.
They pay to get their product and they just say, here are the benefits of the product. And here's the, benefits in your life. And they use direct response. And I think that that's getting harder and harder. So the better you get at like creating genuine connection on the internet, the more that those ad dollars are fuel, not, they're fuel for that fire.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay. What I wanted to do is I want to do a couple, I don't know how long we'll go here. I want to do a couple questions. We did have a bunch of people kind of ask questions in the comments and stuff like that.
That we completely ignored.
Yeah. I mean, I tried to respond to some from my own like YouTube, but then what we probably internally need to talk about, like, what do we do from the checkout YouTube? Like, do we respond to stuff? Cause I'm like, sometimes somebody will like, make fun of someone on the show. And I'm like, I want to join in that. But I'm John. I shouldn't respond from the checkout. Right.
Right. I don't know. Yeah. The comments were great.
So I think there's a couple that there's a good one I want to start with on episode, what was it, 3 or 4? Pretty early on, episode 2. you hard launched your autism ADHD, your ADHD.
ADHD, baby.
You came out. I don't know.
Well, I found out I knew I was ADHD forever. And then I'm diagnosed officially when I was 19. And then just this January, I found out that I also had autism, which made everything make sense. So that's where ADHD comes from, autism and ADHD, which makes my life just completely make sense, because I was just confused up until January.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the comments were so nice, like supportive, and like, I don't know. Yeah.
People were nice, but I want to kind of string together a few ideas here. So somebody had said, hey, you guys should do a whole episode about this. Some other people kind of agreed with what I had to say, which was like, I bet you find a higher percentage of neurospicy people in the entrepreneurship community.
Yeah.
Some people said like, yeah, you guys should talk more about this. Just for this, like, with that whole thing, like people just wanted to hear a little bit more. I want to like focus this around let's jump off on a question here. And it was, are y'all medicated? I'm curious if y'all are medicated for your ADHD, and do you find it makes you less creative? Both you and I are ADHD. Both you and I are medicated.
Yeah.
Do you find it makes you less creative?
I personally do, because, and I think I'm a special case, maybe not special case, but like I wasn't medicated until I was 19. And then I was medicated for a while, and it really helped me just like be a normal human. And then lost insurance and became unmedicated for years. And I figured out how to like, use ADHD as my superpower.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when I was like unmedicated, I was more creative, and I do feel more creative when I'm not medicated, but I also just have such a hard time being like a human. But I'm very creative on human.
Yeah. I had a hard time answering because
You're never creative?
Okay, so just kind of my journey with medicate. I didn't medicate at all until I was in my early 20s, like toward the end of college. And I think that what happens with people who medicate for ADHD is it's whenever they hit their capacity for like what they can handle.
Yeah, that's me for sure.
So I was able to get through all of school, high school, college, everything, just fine. Like I didn't really, need, and it probably, my dad's a therapist, and one of the things he says is about ADHD, and it's kind of tongue in cheek, but he says low intelligence is not a symptom of ADHD.
Yeah, no, it's
most
not.
ADHD people are actually relatively intelligent, and or a lot of them are, and probably definitely a lot in like the entrepreneurship community. Like maybe they thought they weren't because they weren't good at school or whatever, but I was able to get through school just fine. It was after I got married and I like started having like other stuff going on along with school and athletics that it was like just one too many things.
Yeah.
And it like started breaking down, and you like just start getting really frustrated at yourself a lot and stuff like that. And so like usually I would say if you're in that zone where you think you might be ADHD and you're spending a lot of time very frustrated at yourself, it may be worth considering medicating. And I know that there's like a lot more natural stuff and like even D2C brands that are kind of like trying to like be Adderall alternatives at the moment. I can't speak to them. I haven't tried any of them. I will try that. I will say this, I'm on Adderall and it works really well. Like you want to be focused, you will be focused. I remember when I first started taking it, I'm like, is this how everyone else's brain works? Because this is wild. Like I didn't know I was at such a deficit,
Well, my biggest thing when I got back medicated, I forgot how quiet my brain can be when it's medicated, because my brain is so loud, like so many conversations to itself all at the same time, trying to figure out. And that, I think that I relate to you with that, because I was just fine, like I had my little ADHD things that I like forgave myself for like, it's really hard to fold your laundry, and there's like because ADHDers are motivated by interest, not priority or whatever, urgency, you know, like,
Right.
and I decided to get back medicated because I literally I started to get stuck with like, just like physically stuck. I didn't know if I should brush my teeth first, brush my hair first, shower. Should I make my coffee if I do this? Like I would just get stuck in the morning and panic. Like,
Yeah.
and that's when I'm like medicated, I'm able to like decision make better.
Yep.
But like some days I will be like, kind of like, I don't know, just a little bit more rambunctious. And the like ADHD is also a spectrum where there's so many different
Yep.
like levels to it. But I noticed that like sometimes I'm just like, wow, like what's into me today? And then I'm like, oh, I forgot to take
I
my
forgot to
medication.
meditate.
But I'm like super like, I don't know, it's different.
To the creativity question, I would say when I was younger, I had like more creative in depth. So for example, when I was younger, I was like in a band and like I wrote music and stuff like that. I think you did too, or at least you played.
Mhm.
But I don't do that anymore. So it's very hard for me to say whether it is like a help or a hindrance. I do kind of have this theory on creativity though, that it is a bit of a muscle. So I give an example. Lately, I've been writing a lot more comedy because I've been doing more skits. So those will start to come out more and more. You'll start to see more and more of those. But I've been doing more skits. And some of them will be like royal related. Some of them will just be for me or whatever. So I've been starting to like write more comedy, which is a pretty creative endeavor. And I read something about it, and there's like a lot of comedians that have different like views on this and stuff like this. But basically, you know, somebody said, and this is actually can cite the book here. The book is How to Write Funny, and it's by I think, founder of The Onion. And he said, just write for 30 minutes. Your fingers aren't allowed to stop. There's no editor. There's like, you can write, I don't know what to write for 30 minutes. I don't care. Just write though.
Mhm.
But like so I think there's a muscle there, because if you do that, like, and that's how, you know, even with songwriting or like, you know, I had a person who would do a lot of songwriting with me, and it would aggravate me because he would write like one song a month, maybe, and then go months with that, and then maybe two in a week or whatever, just like whenever the muse struck him. Right. And I'd be like, I could write 12 songs in the next 2 days if I wanted to. I would just write them. Right.
Yeah.
They might not all be good, but like the way I would get to 12 good ones is I'd write 50 and 12 of them would be good.
Yeah.
And, you know, or 12 of them would be okay. So I do kind of think creativity is a bit of a muscle. Like you can just do progressive like you can in a muscle with a muscle group. You can progressive overload creativity so that your brain just does it, right? So now I think of skit ideas constantly. You know, I just see them in the world and I write them, you know, I just jot them down really quick in my notes app or whatever. So in a sense, I would say I don't think that it has hindered my creativity, but I might approach creativity a little bit more systematically than a lot of people do. I don't know.
Yeah. I think I am still creative when I am medicated. Like I can still be creative, but when I'm not medicated, my brain has more freedom. So it feels
Yes.
like it doesn't I don't really have to think about being creative
You just
when
are.
I'm not medicated because my brain's just like thinking of so many different things. And I also know this because like when my medication wears off, like towards the end of the night, like before I go to bed, I have so many creative thoughts to the point where it's like hard to sleep. And
Yep.
I have to like brain dump everything. And so like I feel the most creative when I'm like not, you know, yeah, it's like it's very interesting, but I don't know.
Okay, I know you're running a lot of product catalog ads and you're using Marpipe. What are some of the creative tests in your catalog ads that you've noticed that have worked well for Dad Gang?
Honestly, for us, the thing that's performing really well right now is like a three grid breakout of the hat. So a lot of our original catalog ads would just have like the front of the hat showing and not the second image. So being able to showcase like the front, the side, the back of the hat in one ad. The other one, as simple as it sounds, is just like actually putting the price front and center, like a little red circle that actually shows the price, because our hats are great quality, but they're only $35 compared to a lot of like the similar quality of a hat out there is like $45 to $60. So I think being able to showcase an affordable price in one ad is helping too.
So, and like Marpipe specifically, they just bust out tons of variations of your catalogs and keep testing it.
Yeah, you just integrate directly into Slack with their team, let them know what you're kind of looking for. They bust out a bunch of variations. It connects directly into your Ads Manager account, and you don't even have to do that much within Ads Manager. It's a seamless integration into everything you're already doing.
If you're any kind of brand that wants to put your catalog ads on steroids and get more returns, better returns out of your catalog ads, check out marpipe.com. All right, back to the pod. The irony of ADHD, most of the medication is some form of upper, so you shouldn't take it at night, really.
Yeah.
But
then you like have
it
things
wears,
to
but then you
do.
get nighttime ADHD where you
I
like
know.
I will go. There are nights where I need to, like you're saying, your morning. Like I still need to like brush my teeth and like do like I have like a kind of check, like the stuff you got to do before bed. And like the reason I don't go to sleep till 2 a.m. is because I haven't done any of that yet. Like I could be whatever, just bopping around my house or like on my phone or like working or writing stuff, like whatever, you know. But like I will sometimes even be laying in bed, but I laid down before I did that stuff. So I'm like, well, I can't go to sleep yet because I haven't done that stuff yet.
Right. Well, and
but I
also
could get distracted by
time-blindness.
whatever I'm thinking about, whatever's on my phone,
Yeah.
whatever I'm watching, whatever.
The time blindness part of it is like you can get, and like relating it to the creative aspect, like I can do something if I don't have like I'm not physically like reminding myself to look at the time. I will just look down and just be doing whatever creative thing, like whatever, and I'll look up and I'm like, holy shit, 6 hours have gone by. And like it's so hard. Like I don't know what time feels like. It's crazy.
I would put it this way to wrap on this. Like, does it impair your creativity? If you're ADHD, which I'm assuming this person who asked this question is, people are worried about the medication hindering their creativity. I don't think it hinders your ability to be creative. I think that what it does is when you give up hyper distraction, you also give up hyper focuses. So if you're ADHD, you know what that is, right? Like and to anyone who's not ADHD, it's just being in the zone. If you've ever been in the zone on anything, a sport, whatever, it's just being in the zone.
Steroids.
Yeah. So it's like specifically with a mental task, right? So sometimes you will just hyper focus on something and you'll be incredibly productive and two, incredibly creative and able to hold up very complex thoughts and like, you know, hold up like, oh, I've got this and this and this and this and this thing. Like constructs in your mind can get really complicated and you can hold them up just fine. And it takes however long it takes usually when you're kind of in that zone. I would say I don't really hit a lot of those when medicated, which for most working environments is pretty good. Like usually you've got to be time aware, you know, you've got deadlines, you've got calls, you've got to get on, you've got whatever. So I think it's generally a good trade-off, but
I think it's a good trade-off if you need to be a normal human, but if you have the like, sometimes I think about like what a world would be like if it was dedicated to neurodivergent people, and I like don't know if it could like function, but it is really hard to be a normal functioning like neurotypical human when you're not neurotypical. And I think that I need the like a lot of times the ADHD, like the good thing about the medication is like you don't have to take it. Like if you're like, you know, if you feel like you're like, well, I need to be creative, like even more creative today, more than like my forced creative with my medication, then like you can do that too.
Yeah. A couple quick ones. Let's wrap on. Here's a comment. How does Jackie manage her life? Okay. So we've talked in the past about your handler is probably the best thing to call her.
Handler.
There is a third party person. Zoe's two people. Zoe's actually two people. Zoe is Zoe, who you see on this podcast. And then she's also Jackie. And Jackie manages all the logistics of her life, which it's crazy that we're coming off talking about how you're a medicated ADHD person. then who also has somebody who like manages their life for them.
That's the
But
autism.
yeah, which I think, you know, we're just all jealous of, really. Like that's what everybody wants.
Yeah.
But Jackie, we've talked about it before. She's a real live lawyer, like a lawyer at a law firm. How does Jackie manage her life and someone else's life? Does she date? Does Zoe pay her as much as being a lawyer pays her? I have so many questions. So people are wondering about Jackie. We've alluded to her. She made a quick appearance to tell us that it's not illegal to parody a LeBron thing, and that's it. So tell people about Jackie. Maybe answer those questions. Does
Okay.
Jackie date? Do you pay her as much as being a lawyer pays her? This person has so many questions about Jackie. Is Jackie real, or is she just made up?
Yeah, Jackie's real. She does have a boyfriend. I was wondering if that question was if I date or if Jackie dates. Like I was like,
Well,
is
you
that
both.
question like,
To answer, the answer is yes. You both
yeah.
date.
So we both date. We both have a boyfriend. I do pay her very well. Funny thing about Jackie is she pays herself, and I don't care how much she pays herself because I ask her to pay herself well, and then sometimes I'll be like, oh, so like, you know, I'll look at the finances and I'm like, why did you pay yourself only blah blah blah? And she's like, oh, well, I wanted to dedicate more money to like my money to this. And I'm like, what the fuck, Jackie?
You're
I
like, well,
want you to
but
be
don't you
paying
need to
yourself
live?
more. No, and she makes, like, even when she pays herself less, she makes just fine. But like, I'm always like, wow, Jackie does so much for me. So like, I literally don't care how much she pays herself as long as the business is like profitable and I'm paying my bills. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah. And it's comparable to a lawyer. Yes.
Awesome. That's Jackie.
That's Jackie.
This one's a little bit deeper. Maybe we need to just maybe tackle this next season. This person said, I work at a brand. We don't control the projections we're given. They just come from the CFO, but they do feel like they're just made up. How would you suggest I bring this up, or should I?
Yeah, this is
I can give you a very short answer. This is a long answer. Let me give you a very short answer. I don't think this is going to turn out well. Like,
yeah.
I think you should probably just look for another place to work is the most ideal thing you could do.
Yeah. Well, or if you know what you're talking about, do bring it up. Yeah. Because I think a lot of times, and I'll make it short, a lot of times coming from higher up, they don't understand like all of the ins and outs, but they want the right, like everyone's has the same goal of success. And so if you explain yourself and like your like and maybe come to the table with different goals that are realistic.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times that's just their job. That's like what they're supposed to be doing, but they're not in the weeds.
Right.
So, but if they don't react well to like your feedback, then yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If I'm kind of giving more practical advice, then this probably isn't going to work out, which it probably won't. Like most brands that keep habitually over projecting, they're doing it because they have to. And the reason that they have to is because they have to do that to make a profit. And if they keep not hitting those projections, they're probably not making a profit, which means they're probably downsizing at some point. But let's say, you know, there is a chance to sort of like, they're just over projecting growth and really they're fine on less growth. Two things have to be true. One, they have to trust, like everybody's got to trust. There has to be trust that everyone's got the best interest of each other in mind. And I say of each other, not of the brand. You understand the difference?
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
It has to be, yeah. Well, the other thing
the best interest of the brand in mind, not the CFO might not have the best interest of the brand. Everybody's got their own best interest in mind.
Yeah, yeah.
So if the CFO is a key stakeholder in the brand, then they care about you caring about the brand. But if the CFO is an outside hired CFO, he cares about keeping his job or getting his bonus or whatever that's predicated upon, right? So everybody's got to have the best interest. So the best way is to like show that you have his or her. I'm assuming the CFO is a man. I shouldn't do that. His or her. Well, look, if it's an over-projecting CFO who like can't get his numbers right, maybe it's a man. Who knows?
Yeah.
His or her best interest in mind. So they've got to believe that. And then they also have to believe that you're not sandbagging your own goals.
Yeah. They also need to like, it's very layered because I think
you're getting into playing office politics here, really.
Yeah. And if there's not structure of like where all of the money is coming from, like it's so hard for me to answer that question because I think that like if a lot of brands don't have that under so it's just like, I don't know. If you do know where all the money is coming from and you know what all of those numbers are currently, then it should be easy to show your CFO like, hey, this money came from here, this money came from here, this is why. Then like, how do you expect us to X, Y, and Z to get those? Like, if you break it down like channel by channel, then yeah. But definitely bring it up. Don't just keep, and then get another.
Yeah, we're finding somewhere else to work.
Yeah.
Dust off your resume and put out your fillers and like hit your network up. I think, I'm not saying don't bring it up. I am saying that the CFOs, the C-suite team, the founder, whatever, they're not dumb. They know if they keep missing their projections. So if they keep over projecting anyway,
Yeah.
I think that you shouldn't assume that they're just not smart. You know what I mean? So if you work from a place of like, they're probably not, unless they aren't, like if like they're not smart though, then maybe bring it up, but like do it in like a tactful. They've got to think you have their best interest in mind, right? Okay, and then there was quite a few on the episode about how I talked about getting fired. I'm trying to remember if there's any questions though. Yeah, nothing. There was some good stories on here. I think I want to address a recurring comment. I'll read a few variations of this comment. Here's one variation of this comment. Here, I think I can just do a Command F and look for my name here. I mean, some people are pretty funny with it. John has some long ass monologues.
Oh yeah. Or like John talks too much. Does John let anyone else talk?
John was like 20% less annoying in this episode.
I don't think you're annoying, but oh yeah, John.
John, let other people talk. You've got to let your co-host talk. Okay. First of all, kudos to our commenters for dialing in to my biggest insecurity as a podcaster in episode 1. They figured this out, episode 1, that I talk too much and I interrupt people. Number 2, nobody even knows what I do or like knows like where I'm coming from with this. Does that make sense? Like, I try to do a good job of like building up all of you guys and saying like, oh, this is this person, like what they do, and like asking you about stuff. Like, I am smart. All right. I have good stuff to say. People pay me to talk to them. And you should all be grateful that I'm talking so much is my defensive, non-emotionally intelligent response to this. Stop talking so much, John. Nonsense that I just want to put a kibosh on.
I loved those comments. I was reading those out loud to Jackie.
I don't need, listen, these get put in the group chat. And I don't need Shackelford reading any more comments about how I talk too much. So use a code word. Like, what can they say as a code thing to signal to me that I've talked too much in this episode without cluing Nick in to the fact that I'm talking too much without saying,
just
John,
be like, you're doing that thing again. And then we should like mute you.
Yeah. Well, no, like if they see an episode and they're commenting and they're like, hey, John, muskrat, or like maybe there's a code word. Or something.
Like they comment down below.
Yeah, like John's really looking like the bird. Hey, John, that beard's really looking kind of muskratish. And I'm like, oh, there's the keyword. That means I'm talking too much.
And put the timestamp and then like all of the timestamps.
Yeah. They're like, well, there's not really a timestamp for this because it was going on for 20 minutes straight. But
yeah, from this to this. Yeah. We'll make the chapters John talking. No,
John
we should make the chapters of the videos just only when you're not talking so they can skip to those parts.
Yeah. Were there any other comments that you thought were good or you wanted to address or respond to or anything like that?
No, but I think that this was really good conversation, and we should go through like and grab a bunch of comments and address them more timely because there are great questions and stuff hidden in here.
Yeah, for sure. Great thoughts or insights. You know what I mean? Some people just like, there's some pretty smart people who listen, I think. So
yeah, y'all are smart.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a wrap on season 1. I appreciate everybody who's on the journey with us. The other thing I would say is leave us comments on like what you liked, or even like, how do I frame this question? What is it that is like about, like, what is it with this podcast? So like, for example, like, you know, there's one podcast that I listen to that is sort of like a comedy podcast where they cover news from a certain angle. And it's like, you know, that's not really how I get my news, but it's how I get the obscure news that I wouldn't care about anyway, where I kind of like, I have these talking points, you know, that are sort of like cocktail party talking points of like, oh, did you hear about this? Right. Or I'm like clued into things that I don't really care about that much, but I can kind of listen to these guys talk about it because they're funny. Right.
Mhm.
So like, I kind of am like, oh, I'm like using this to get those like not main news, not the not main news. I use this podcast for that. Or like, you know, some people, like, I would assume that what people like about this podcast is that it's like, oh, it feels like kind of just being like a, you know, conversation among friends that, you know, just about business or making money or whatever. That's what I would assume, but I don't know. So that's what I really want that feedback of like, what is it about this that you liked or kind of made you listen when there's so many other marketing podcasts or e-commerce podcasts or whatever out there, you know?
And we'll read the comments and maybe we'll respond to them at the end of the next season.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to make it more of what people like and less of what people don't like. Maybe less of what people don't like is me talking.
No, I don't think. I think they're just giving you a hard time. They're just pulling your leg.
I'm going to say one more thing on this. The amount of times I've had to edit out other people just leaving dead air because I'm not talking.
That one episode was so funny when we and Bart were like, you were like giving me and Bart time to talk, and we were like, we didn't know what to do.
You just both didn't say anything.
And I'm like, Bart, you want to talk? He's like, nah, you got this one. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, fine, John, you could talk.
Yeah. So like when I pass the ball and my teammates just drop it, you can understand why I'm hesitant to pass the ball. All right.
It's so funny because it's like, I think too, it just depends on like the day too, because it's like at the end of a Wednesday and I'm like, sometimes I'm just like, I want to just listen to you guys.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And like you guys are along for the, it's like, oh, if I have something, you guys sit in that seat of if I have something to say, I'll say it. But if I don't, I can hang out, you know, that's fine. Whereas I'm sort of driving the show. So you get in that mode of driving the show. You probably do this on your own show where you're like, you probably talk too much.
I for sure do. And then I'm like, oh shit, this is supposed to be about the guest. And then I'm like,
yeah, because you're trying to drive the content forward, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Zoe, I appreciate you. It's been a fun season. I think, you know, the reason we're kind of wrapping the season right here is because, frankly, it's summer. And, you know, the whole idea of the checkout was like, maybe if I get enough people, we can still do episodes. We've had whole weeks where it's like, no, 3 out of 4 people can't make it. And even this week, it's just me and Zoe. So, you know, I think as we get into summer, probably as fall ramps, we're going to hit season 2 bigger and better. Going to try and plan some stuff that I think makes season 2 even better and more valuable. And that's why I want the content, the comments and the feedback so that we can hear like, oh, here's what the current listeners want more of or less of. So here's how we can make the experience better for them. And yeah, that's it. Anything to say? Any parting shot? Like, I feel like I'm ending summer camp right now. Like,
I know.
I'm like,
no, yeah,
I'll probably see you next year, right?
Yeah. This season was really fun. And it was nice to get so much love. So for such a new podcast and so I'm excited. I think we should try to figure out how to do in-person ones, but maybe.
Well, I mean, you're a little tease. I like it. A little tease. This is the thought I had. This is a thought I'm having for season 2. So, all right, cool. We'll see y'all.
Bye.